Hey everybody, John here from the esports department, as per usual, going over tonight's 4-game slate, and we got another banger on our hands here. As many of you guys know, I managed to pick up the win in the Forceful Blow yesterday for 35,000. That was pretty nice. I'd like to parlay that into some success on this slate, and this slate feels pretty similar to me. There's only kind of one maybe slight difference as far as I'm concerned. Let's start with JDG versus RNG. JDG hasn't looked the same as they looked last split necessarily, but this is still a really good team. This is the one matchup where I feel like there is kind of a predetermined result. JDG is pretty likely to beat RNG, I think. RNG, I think they're going to struggle a little bit this split. I think they had a style last split when they were at their most successful that was kind of figured out in many ways. And as teams have adapted to that, they've looked a little bit worse and a little bit worse. They still have looked like a solid team, probably a playoff level team, but they haven't looked super impressive. As far as lane by lane, they're still running Xiaohu, which I think a lot of people are still very, sort of questioning when we're going to see Cryan come in that mid lane. It could be a little spark of something for the team. I would consider Xiaohu a pretty high sub risk now that they've lost a little bit and are likely to lose here. I would definitely consider Xiaohu a sub risk. Their top laner, New, I doubt we'll see him get subbed out this series. He still should be considered somewhat of a sub risk, but I think they'll probably stick with him. It seems like they're trying to make him the guy, and that seems reasonable to me. Ming should be safe. I think Betty should be safe, and XLB seems safe in the jungle. JDG, I do think, win this matchup a fair bit of the time. RNG doesn't strike me as a great play tonight either. We'll look at the stats in a minute, but excuse me, guys. It seems like their ownership probably doesn't make them a great leverage play anyway. Probably some people are going to find their way on RNG tonight, but we'll look at that when we go over ownership as well. Next up, Victory 5 against BLG. So I'm a little bit surprised that Victory 5 is being considered this big of a favorite. I think BLG got off to a slow start, but if you guys have been watching my videos, you know I've kind of considered BLG to be a good underdog play in a couple matchups now. They have some good players on that team. I think Fofo is a really excellent mid laner. They're switching up their top lane for this matchup to ADD, which I like. I've always thought ADD was a better player than Kingin. I'm happy that they're bringing ADD back in. He is a sub risk. They've definitely taken him out for Kingin mid-series and vice versa a number of times last split, so we should not consider ADD super safe, but he is playable. I'm still a little bit surprised that they're sticking with best 16 in the jungle instead of Meteor. I think Meteor is a very, very good player, and I'm very surprised that we have not seen him yet. As far as the bot lane, I think that's Victory 5's biggest advantage in this matchup, should be the bot lane. PP God and Sam D have both looked very, very good for Victory 5. I do think they should be a favorite. BLG, a very, very live play as far as an underdog on this slate. However, I'm also thinking that BLG might be a very highly owned underdog on this slate. So be a little bit careful with the BLG as far as I think their ownership percentage will be pretty high, but they're a very, very live underdog. KT against Team Dynamics. So Team Dynamics, the new team to the LCK. KT made some roster moves in the offseason. We've kind of laid out where we thought KT would end up on their roster. They brought in Smeb. I have a hard time seeing Smeb not starting for them, given that he has a very big name in the community. It's possible he doesn't. We're going to have to stay up for lineups and see if we can get lucky and catch whether or not they're going to leave Smeb in the top lane. UCal, you have to assume, is starting basically for sure. Aiming and Tucson were great last season. Bono makes sense as far as the jungle. The thing that you have to remember with this team, or with this matchup, is Team Dynamics. They're a newer team. They have some guys that have been in the LCK before, but I've talked for a while about that the next generation, when they come up, does tend to be better than the current generation. I think KT is a rightful heavy favorite here. I wouldn't be that surprised to see a young team with some tricks up their sleeves like Dynamics come out and beat KT here. Don't be too surprised that that's the case, because those young teams, APK Prince came out last season and did it to a bunch of different teams. People thought they might not win a game, or they'd be close to not winning a game, and they came out and beat some teams over the course of the season. Dynamics should do the same thing. KT a very reasonable heavy favorite, though. We'll have to check rosters for them to be entirely sure, but you got to think KT's a pretty reasonable favorite. Going on to HLE versus the new version of APK Prince. Solhei 1 Prince is their new name. And they're basically the same team they were last season. You can see we had their roster down here. The difference maker, or the difference that they brought in, is Mickey, coming in from EU. He was playing for XL last split. We're not 100% sure that Mickey is going to start this matchup. I would guess that if they brought him in from overseas, that probably they're going to try to start him. Admittedly, Mickey's from here anyway, so it's not like he's not just going home here, but I would expect Mickey to start, and other than that, you're looking at the same APK Prince lineup from last season, which was a lineup that was heavily focused around hybrid, their AD carry, very AD carry centric. Playing up against HLE, so HLE's made some changes as well. Kuve will stay up in the top lane most likely, I think. Lava probably most likely to be the mid laner. Lehens and Viper is the big deal, the old Griffin combo that won the LCK, or came first in the regular season in the LCK. Very strong bot lane, and they'll be facing off against APK's or Solhei 1's most strongest lane in the bot lane as well. A deserved favorite for HLE, I think. No reason to think that Solhei 1 has taken a big step up from last season just by adding Mickey, who wasn't really very good even in his EU run. HLE should probably be even a little bit bigger of a favorite than they are, I would guess. They do have a weak jungle, but you know that I don't think it's something that's going to be completely destroyed by Solhei 1. Solhei 1, once again, though, a very live underdog. HLE should be the favorite, but you could definitely see Flawless taking advantage of the jungle matchup. The bot lane matchup seems relatively even. Ixu is definitely a back-and-forth type player. You never really know if he's going to end up going off or completely feeding. He's got a bit of the shy in him. He plays some very weird picks. So I would keep Solhei 1 as definitely an option as someone to play tonight for sure. Let's look at the possible combinations here. So the thing that I've been loving to do, and some other people have told me they're enjoying as well, is going to the favorites first and looking at where we can get our scoring from. So looking at the favorites, so I got to get rid of these people that aren't playing. Give me a second on that. Also, I shouldn't say not playing, the people that we don't expect to play, because none of these people are confirmed not playing for any sort of reason. I'm going to change my team projections as well, because that's what I do. And let's look at who projects to score the highest and wins. Surprising, HLE at the top lane is actually projected to score the highest, with Victory 5 projecting to score the least, which is going to be surprising to some people. BLG tends to play pretty low kill games, and it doesn't super surprise me that V5 is not projecting super well tonight. But I'm completely lying to you, because they actually project third, not fourth. But HLE does stay top. And that is an interesting part of tonight, is I think these are two kind of bloody rosters, and I think KT and Dynamics as well. Something I have to bring up about KT and Dynamics. So Dynamics, we don't have their statistics from the past, because we only track LCK statistics, and it takes a lot of effort to go get a team's statistics from the lower leagues, and I'm not sure how relevant it would be since they're playing against lower league teams. So what we've done with Team Dynamics for tonight is treated Team Dynamics like an average team from the league. So we took the average everythings from everybody and treated Dynamics that way for this slate. That probably puts them a little bit lower on most scales than they actually will be, given that they're coming from Challengers Korea. They're probably a little bit bloodier than an average LCK team. So you might treat both KT and Dynamics as if they're being a little bit undervalued today in the projections. I think that's something to keep your eye on for sure. So we have HLE, and then JDG and V5. HLE again, JDG and V5. V5, JDG, HLE. So the mid lane a weakness for HLE. AD carry projecting lowest of the gang for HLE, which doesn't surprise me. The other teams, Victory 5 and KT in particular, play a lot more towards their AD carries than HLE did last season anyway, so that doesn't surprise me too much. And then HLE back at the top again when it comes to support. So you're actually seeing an LCK team projecting above the LPL teams, which is definitely worth noting. And it doesn't surprise me that they're up against Solhei 1, aka APK Prince, who was one of the bloodier teams in the league last year and rivaled LPL teams. As far as LCK or LPL teams go, we have some of the less bloody options. JDG closed games out fairly aggressively last season. RNG was one of the least bloody teams. BLG was one of the least bloody teams. Victory 5 is a whole new squad. So even though they were very bloody last season, we shouldn't necessarily assume that that's going to be automatic this season. They have been reasonably bloody this season so far, so it'll be interesting to see how they and BLG balance out being a very bloody team and being a very conservative team. See where they land in that middle ground. I just think it's worth noting that HLE is actually popping on these statistics a lot better. KT is not. They're near the bottom in most metrics, but HLE is popping and makes for a pretty good play tonight. They probably will have significantly lower ownership, and they're looking to score pretty well. Let's look at the underdogs, see where the points are coming from there. And let me get rid of these people again. I should have done this before we started, but I forgot. And give my team projections in there as well. Okay, so looking at the underdogs, BLG projecting very well. Now this part is not so surprising. You have Victory 5 projecting kind of poorly, BLG looking like they project pretty well, because we believe that the losing team dictates a fair bit of what goes on in LPL games. Teams that fight for every objective, like Victory 5, tend to be very bloody opponents when they're losing, whereas teams like BLG that are more willing to just give up some dragons and scale for late or whatever make for less bloody opponents. Even if they're up against a bloody team, if they refuse to fight them and just keep conceding things, the other team's just not going to have a very bloody game. We did a lot of back testing before we started this season to see how much we should factor in winning scores and losing scores. We back tested for a whole season to see what would end up working, and I don't remember the exact numbers for the LPL, but league to league it was very different. And we tried to use the ones that were most accurate for the league by league. So it makes sense to me that BLG projects pretty highly while Victory 5 projects kind of badly. That makes kind of sense, makes a decent amount of sense to me. RNG and JDG probably treated the same way. I imagine it is. Yep, RNG projecting very well while JDG did not project that well. Also makes sense. JDG underdogs, when they win in general, tend to outperform their favorite counterparts. The games tend to be longer and closer and involve more fights if an underdog is going to overcome a big favorite. When big favorites win, a lot of the time it's just a rollover. You know, they win the game 15-2 and they win it at 26 minutes. When underdogs win, a lot of the time it's like they got a couple early dragons, and then they won a dragon fight, then they lost a dragon fight, and then they had a big Baron fight that was close, but they got the Baron, and then, you know, it goes like that, and then the games go a little bit longer, the scoring gets a little bit higher. It almost always makes sense that the underdogs are rated to score a little bit better. Who's not rated to score very well? Solhe 1 showing up a little bit weak here. Third position in most metrics. Hybrid showing up very well. We talked about how they play towards 80 carry. But for the most part, they're showing up not very strong. And then Dynamics is showing up at the bottom on every metric, but we did talk about how they're being treated as an average LCK team right now, and they might be a little bit on the bloodier than that, so I might treat them as if they had a little bit more in the tank. What this is kind of telling us is that if we want to play an underdog, we might go to the LPL and try to get RNG or BLG, who both have reasonable chances to win. I think RNG less than the others, but they have reasonable chances to win. And when we try to get a favorite, we might consider going towards ownership and trying to pick up HLE as a possible favorite there. As far as cash goes, just looking here, you would go that it's probably KT and JDG that you would want to look at. So let's try them real quick and see what we come up with. Let's go with KT and JDG, the biggest favorites on the slate. You can get a jungle captain that projects at 565, 3 JDG, 3 KT. It doesn't leave any money on the table, so I'm guessing you're not going to be able to upgrade a KT player to JDG. It means this is probably the best you're going to be able to do is this exact lineup. Bono captain with Zoom, Kanavi, Yukal, Loken, Tucson, and JDG team. If you dropped JDG team, actually KT roster team is more expensive, so that's not going to help you at all. So this looks like probably the best you're going to get from them. Let's try it out if we did JDG and HLE. I have a fair bit of faith in HLE in this matchup, so you gain a lot of points in upside by doing this. You go up to 591. still runs a 3-3. It leaves 300 on the table. Is there a way that perhaps we could switch these two? There's a fair bit of a difference there. Is there a way we could get a fourth player from one of our teams in here? We could definitely get an upgrade, or we could definitely get over to Viper Captain. He projects, or Viper as our AD carry, he projects a little bit lower. JDG, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get up to any JDG players. We could go from Cuvée to Zoom. Just trying to see if there's a way for us to get a more like balanced 4-4 or 4-2 type lineup instead of 3-3. But it doesn't look like there's a lot of options really. You'd have to drop Yagao down to Lava, which has a much... actually, no, he projects almost the same. So saving 1,000 right there is a pretty big deal. Then you could go up and get Zoom. You'd still have 900 left over. At support, to get up to Lumao only costs 200. Keep in mind, I'm not doing this lineup because I think this is the superior lineup. I'm just doing it as another option for people. If the projections, for the most part, if they tell you that they think that one lineup is the best, for the most part, I trust them on that. This is a way you can get 4 JDG, though, which might be a little bit safer, given that even though KT is ranking as safer, I think JDG is just as safe or safer and has higher upside. So there's a 4 JDG if you like. Kanavi Captain with Zoom, Haru, Lava, Loken, Lumao, and HLE team. That one works as well. So I would go with either that one, or you can go with KT. Oh yeah, because we were using HLE here. So if you want to get 4 JDG, it makes tons of sense to switch to 4 JDG. The KT one has a lower ceiling, but it's probably a fair bit safer on kind of a scary slate. I wouldn't mind doing something like that. Let's look at possible lineups for GPP. I just want to check out some combinations that might be possible for GPP here to see where you might be gaining or losing value on who you're captaining. So JDG did not stand out to us. It was mostly HLE that was standing out as a big favorite. If we pair them with, say, KT, you're looking at 80 carry captain there. So there's a very strong lineup right there. If we go with, like, say, Victory 5, 80 carry captain is possible with KT and Victory 5. What if we put... Oh, no, wait, that's KT, HLE, and Victory 5. Hold on. 80 carry captain is possible with HLE. With KT, you can do it as well. So, yeah, you can get 80 carry captains as long as you're leaving out JDG for the most part. Like any other combination of favorites goes with 80 carry captains. That makes me really kind of want to stay away from JDG a little bit. They're not in a great matchup. They don't project that well, and they don't get you the best captains. You can get better captains playing any other combination of the favorites. So it makes tons of sense to me to maybe look away from JDG as a possibility. But let's look at ownerships. So I would think that JDG would actually be the highest owned team on the slate. I could be wrong about this. They are a big favorite. They're from the LPL, so their lineup is confirmed. A lot of times I would say that KT would be the highest owned here, but the lineup is going to be confirmed and already has been confirmed for JDG, which makes me think that they're more likely to be up there. Next, I would say it's between Victory 5 and KT as to who's going to be next. KT's a big favorite. Victory 5 will have a confirmed lineup and is still a reasonable favorite. I'm going to go with KT. I'm not sure that's going to be true. It's always sketchy when you're talking about teams that don't have confirmed lineups. Sometimes their ownership is just in the pits because people don't want to mess with them when their lineups aren't going to be confirmed. But this makes sense to me. I would guess it then goes Victory 5 and then BLG, I think. A lot of people are talking about BLG. I think BLG probably makes their way into 4th, probably ahead of HLE even. BLG seems to be the go-to underdog for this slate. They're pretty cheap considering that they're only plus 125, and I think money is coming in towards them as well. People definitely think BLG has a good shot to win tonight. BLG might actually even be above Victory 5 because you can pair BLG Well, you compare V5 with all the other favorites, but you compare BLG with JDG, which is probably going to be a very popular combination in GPPs today. So I'm guessing you might see even higher ownership on BLG than I'm looking at here. This is the toughest ownership breakdown I've done. Yesterday I was reasonably confident about where I was at, and I ended up being very wrong on one team. I was overall very correct, but SKT I was very wrong about. RNG probably comes in next here. Confirmed rosters, LPL, people just generally view it as always the bloodier region. Can probably pair very well with Victory 5, which makes a standard stack of players that people will not have any problem with. Solheim 1 probably comes in next. HLE was not exactly fantastic last season, so it doesn't surprise me that, even though their roster's not 100% locked in, that people might want to mess around there. Pretty much guarantee that Dynamics is going to be the lowest owned team, pretty much for sure. So a couple options for you there. I think these are probably what you're looking at as far as ownerships for the slate. This is the area where I think we could have some question marks, right in this three-piece. I'm pretty sure JDG is going to be the highest owned. These four make a lot of sense to me like this. These three, I think, could get swapped around one way or another. Trying to get some ownership leverage for GPPs, I think HLE makes a lot of sense if they're going to be pretty low owned, which I think they might be. Solheim 1 makes a lot of sense. You never know if HLE is going to click right away, and Solheim 1 is a team that definitely has upset potential. BLG, even at fourth highest owned, the thing with BLG is they're going to be pretty highly owned, I think, but I think a lot of it is going to be with JDG. So maybe pairing them with KT, or pairing them with HLE, or pairing them with another underdog might be a good way to get BLG at a lower ownership. You could try a game stacks. On 4-game slates, I'm really not a fan of trying that. If I was going to on this slate, honestly, it would probably be Solheim 1 HLE. I think that makes the most sense for a game stack, but I don't know that I would go that direction for a slate like this. So that's pretty much all I can say about this slate, I think. It's going to be a very interesting one. For cash games, I would definitely stick, like I said, with either KT JDG or JDG HLE. You could do KT HLE if you wanted, but some combination of those three teams. HLE is going to give you some more ceiling, but you're going to lose some win percentage, so it might make sense to just go with a more consistent JDG and KT roster. That makes the most sense to me, I think, is JDG, KT, or if you want to take a little bit of a gamble, maybe you're playing something like a League, a 3-man or something, maybe you go with HLE in one of those two. For GPP, yeah, as per usual, there's some good dogs in here. Take a shot on some of these dogs. I wouldn't get in there with a lineup that was like JDG, KT. That's always my advice, and it would be my advice again this time around. It's possible that JDG might end up a little bit lower owned than this because they might be a little bit harder to fit with people, and people would rather get that 80 carry captain that they can get in this range and not mess with JDG and their jungle captain. So really, there's a lot of reasons to do a lot of things tonight. It just kind of depends how you're feeling about the slate and how you feel about everything that we talked about here. Hopefully we have some more success tonight, guys, and I will talk to you guys again later. Hit me up, as usual, on Twitter, the Discord, anywhere like that. You can get my thoughts on a minute-to-minute basis if you like. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.